Welcome. Today on The Homefront with Jeff Dudan, we are going to release a podcast that I was actually on. A friend of mine, Michael Reddington, who is a certified forensic investigator and the owner of Inquasive, which is a training and advisory firm for interrogation and sales training and really disciplined listening and communication. And Michael allowed me to speak to some things that I am very passionate about: coaching kids, culture, and living a life going deeper into your purpose. And I enjoyed the episode, and I wanted to share it here with you today on The Homefront. Enjoy.
Good morning, Jeff. It is so great to see you, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to have this conversation today. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Michael. Always enjoy my time with you, and I'm looking forward to this morning.
You are somebody with a wealth of experience and expertise in so many different directions. And when I first started conceptualizing this show, you were one of the very first people I wanted to have on. So I'm thrilled that we get to have this conversation today. When I think about your experience and expertise growing and running businesses, your expertise, executive coaching, we were talking about earlier, kids coaching, which is something we have in common. I'm really excited to get across today in our conversation. But you've done so much, you've achieved so much. So many directions I could go with this, but the one place I would like to start the conversation is honestly something that you and I have never really talked a lot about in the past, which is the episode that you starred in for the TV show Undercover Boss. And for all of the CEOs that I've worked with, I shouldn't say all, but many of them, one of the things that I find can be difficult for them to realize is the impact they have on the people around them just by their title alone, just by being the person in charge and being in the room, how people will change how they act, they'll change how they talk, they'll change how they behave, all of these things because, the CEO is here. But you ambushed people. You had a fancy disguise, which I think part of which might be memorialized on the sign behind you there. But you actually embedded yourself with your team. So for me to start this, I guess the first question I have for you is, what was the most surprising lesson you learned getting to interact with your team at their level while you were running at Advantaclean?
Well, thank you for the question. And I can say that there wasn't some great epiphany or some great reminder. It was confirming. It was confirming, and there was also pride inside of that, because when you go out, Advantaclean was just created off of, out of nothing. And one of the things I like to say is leaders, the highest order of leadership is to be able to stand on nothing and create something. And we literally paid our employees $25 to come up with the name of the business. And we're like, who could come up with the name? And here's what it is. And so, I mean, when you think back to those early days and those great people that stood with you in the beginning, and then you come forward some 20 years and you're on this national television show with 7.1 million viewers. And it's something that was just created and iterated on over time. And then you go out into the field and you're there, and these great people. I say, a franchise system isn't 2,000 employees. It's 200 families with 10 employees. And it's a totally different thing. And they're working hard. They're trying to be relevant in their community. And it's just, you go into these markets with these businesses and you're reminded, like, wow, this is just like the business we started 20 years ago. They're facing the same challenges. They're doing the same work. And it's a great sense of pride that you were able to take a model that helped your family and create security and create financial freedom and create opportunities and growth and all of those things. And you've been able to give that to other people through franchising, and they've been able to accomplish the same thing. So a great sense of pride, a great sense of confirmation, and also knowing that, Advantaclean was a very values forward organization, and we did lots of things that were evidence of that, and just to see how well these people were not only being treated as employees and staff of the various locations, but also how well they were treating the customers. And how that there was a through line of servant leadership. There was a through line of community and accountability and results and excellence inside of all of it. And that was one of the more rewarding parts of the experience.
I appreciate the illustration, and none of that surprises me. Just having worked with you the little bit that I have, thinking back to those days when we originally met, when you were still there. You've obviously since exited and gone on to many other things, which we'll talk about during our time together today. Once there was the reveal at the end, did you see people change at all? How they interacted with you once they knew who you were?
Yeah, it was so. This show is exceptionally well done. And I think some of my confidentialities are perpetual.
Got
So
it.
I would never disclose exactly how they do the show. But what I can tell you is that it is a material production. And in the size and scope of it is such that people would never think, even up until the end, that it's Undercover Boss, even though they've watched the show for years. And it's very, very well done in the way that they do it. And when we considered doing it, you have to think about the risk. I sat my family down, and we were we had this little bonus room, and we had a couch, and behind on the wall was a quote from my college football coach, a guy named Jerry Moore, who was legendary at Appalachian State University, and kind of a giant killer, and won lots of national championships at their level, and now they've moved up into the bowl level. But it says, always do more than is expected. And then, we have our family values there, which is trust yourself to take chances, fail fast and move forward. Those types of things. And when we talk with the family about the risk of doing the show, look, this could go poorly. We could get some negative press. People don't know what kind of business we have. Your friends might treat you differently at school. I had no idea what the impact was going to be, if it was going to be something that was a thing in the town, or if it wasn't going to be a thing in the town, or in their schools and whatever. So there's all kinds of risk to each of us, things changing for how we were perceived or how they were perceived at school. But if you honor your values, and if those, what I just spoke, are true, then you have to say yes, and you have to show up, and you have to take risks. So there was risks inside of that. And then, another big tenet of leadership is accessibility. So being accessible to the employees of the franchisees and going out and doing this was, so everything was aligned for us to say yes. So it wasn't a hard yes, but it was a fast yes. We had about a week to decide, because somebody had dropped out and they needed somebody for season 8. And they came out the next day from LA. They shot a sizzle reel. For all afternoon, they put together a clip. They got it to CBS. CBS usually turns down 9 out of 10 of them. And we got through, and then we got the contracts and the paperwork, and we had to get all that done. And it was all within a 7 to 10 day period, because they needed to get us out on the road and to get this spot filled for their next season. So for whatever reason, they didn't show it that season. They chose to do a rerun. We were going to be the last episode of the season, but for whatever reason, and I think maybe it's because the episode was good or some other reason, they held it over and they kicked off the next year with it, which was great for us. So we had to wait an extra 4 or 5 months for it to come out. And I'm like, oh man, is it ever going to air? And then they ultimately aired it in January. So to kick off the new season. So it was great. And then I'm trying to get back to your original question, which was what?
Well, number one, I don't want you to break any of your contracts for sure. But my general question was, once people had an idea of who you really were, did it
Right.
change how they reacted or communicated with you? Like at one point, were they kind of buddy buddy, and then once they knew who you were, was it, oh no, now I'm back to he's the CEO. I need to change how I interact with him.
Well, put yourself in their shoes. They just got major bling laid upon them. I mean, you have to give away, a $250,000 in value over a handful of people. So, not everything that these people got was even aired on the show because we filmed over 100 hours to get the 42 minutes that ultimately aired. So, they were excited, but I think it was probably more excited based on the windfall that they were just given, you know, and I was the beneficiary of a nice thank you and all that stuff. But it could have been anybody. I mean, think about it. You don't care who sells you the lottery ticket. You're
That
going
is
to be
true.
very grateful that somebody did.
That's a really good point. I'm gonna hang on one second so I don't cough in every. Apologize for that. Sinuses have been killing me recently. Um, as I was listening to you go through that, talking about your values, your decision making process, bringing your family into that, all things I would love to get back to throughout the conversation. But one of the things that I couldn't help thinking about is knowing a little bit of your story and how you got started. And I think Hurricane Andrew was the first hurricane, and then it was Katrina after that. For you to stay in touch with your roots, for you to remember what it was like for you as you build these franchises and you work with these families, does that experience that you had standing this up from nothing and doing so much of the hard work yourself in the beginning, is that what makes it so easy for you to relate and resonate with people at all levels of the organization? Because I feel like as time goes on, that's something that CEOs can begin to struggle with.
That's fair. And I think we can all get caught up in reading our own press clippings. We can all get tone deaf to the needs of it. But yeah, at the end of the day, and we've talked about it, you're coaching now. Children, I coached over 30 seasons of my kids' sports. I really like franchising because you get to work with business owners, first time business owners, people that are building, they're traveling that same path that we traveled back in the mid 90s to start a business, introduce a new business to the marketplace. That's where I love to be. I just love to be in that creation mode, that market introduction mode, building galvanizing a team to go win a championship or to go win a market or to take a brand national with a bunch of people that like have a stake in it. And it's just, franchising is the greatest wealth creation business model ever invented, according to our industry people. Surely people have made a lot of money in oil and gas, real estate, technology, and all these other things too. And those are great business models as well. But, for the accessibility on Main Street USA to create financial security, freedom, and generational wealth for you and your family and the people that you care about, franchising is a great option. And there's no real limit to the size of business that you can build being a franchisee. So to me, it's exciting. And that getting back to, I never seem to get too far away from that because I'm always driving back into what do these people need to be successful? What is it going to take for what do they need to hear? What does their perspective and mindset need to be? What do they need to be willing to risk? What's in it for them to gain? What are the upside for these people? So, that's kind of where I get fired up. Unfortunately or fortunately, like I'm pretty purpose driven. We're all wired differently. I mean, finance people make tons and tons of money, man, and they love just all day digging into these spreadsheets and these numbers and these ratios, and like they understand, where value is uncovered and how to unleash value in companies. And by reading the tea leaves of the numbers and combining that with strategy and additional resources and stuff, and that's all great. my leadership, I need those people in my world, but, I would prefer to be leading a class or speaking to a group of people and really informing them, who they need to be successful inside of that. So, that's the kind of leader that I am. And I never really stray far away from coaching, teaching, and influencing as best I can people to do things for themselves and to take accountability and to commit and to really change their station in life to something better, something that they desire, something that they want, something that's meaningful.
And I'll vouch for that because I still have notes from a conversation you probably don't even remember having because you have so many of these. But once upon a time, we ended up at Old Mecklenburg Brewery after a training seminar with a couple of leaders from your team. And just in a
Yes.
casual conversation, you were in teacher mode still. And that was, I believe, when my wife was pregnant with our son. So it was parenting, it was business, it was everything in between. And so I can vouch for you consistently being in that teaching mode. So I've got two questions for you based just off of what you just said. The first one is you mentioned there just towards the end, what do people need to be? So when you think about standing up a franchise, when you think about running a business, when you think about growing a successful team or organization, what do people need to be in order to be a successful leader that develops a company behind them?
I had Vern Harnish on my podcast, and I asked him that question, and his answer was people his and remember, like, he's the guy who started EO. He's the guy who had gazelles and started scaling up. So this is a guy that's built organizations that are some of in their disciplines are some of the biggest organizations in the world today. He's the guy who got 28-year-old Steve Jobs to come speak to his group of entrepreneurial club that he built when he was in college. So, and he said, great leaders are, number one, they're intensely focused. And Jerry Seinfeld said, and this is where I get my philosophy, right? I'm trying to be a stoic, but I'm studying stoicism, but it keeps me, I think it helps. But I also go to comedians to get a lot of perspective. So he said, lack of focus leads to lack of greatness. And the more intensely focused that you can become around things, the deeper that you're going to see into it, the quicker you're going to iterate on it. You're going to remove latency between the time you make a decision or an insight becomes apparent to you and taking the action and measuring the results. So intense focus really accelerates anything that you're doing. The second thing is rabid curiosity. And I've become very attuned to people. And to me, when I'm working, we have a new manager in our business or even an executive. One of the most important things that I observe is their level of curiosity by the questions that they ask. Are they taking information and writing it down and saying, okay, and then walking out of the room? One of the great things that you say is how many questions did I just create for you? In every conversation, questions should be created and are created. So intense focus, rabid curiosity are two things that, what are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you learning about the marketplace? Where does that lead you to go next? You really have to you can't be mentally lazy when you're starting a business because there's it's like a puzzle. The answer is always there. It's just a matter of finding out which way you're going to go to find the right and the best answer, and then how quickly you can get there. And then third, I mean, you've got to be a great communicator. You have to be constantly communicating to the people that make a difference to you and to your business. That's your team. That's the people that report directly to you. That's speaking to the troops. If you have people in your organization that do not report directly to you, that's to the marketplace. That's to the referral partners. Every business has people that they need to be relevant to. So communicating, in our case, franchisees, being, communicating what we stand for, what we're here to accomplish. And then at our convention, at our homecoming last week, the evidence of everything that we told them that we stood for, the evidence that those things are happening and those things are delivered. We told them we cared about, attracting dynasty builders to create generational wealth on Main Street, USA, to address the widening wealth gap in this country. We care about children and young people. So we rolled out a partnership with Carson Scholars to build reading rooms across the country. We care about transitioning veterans. So we rolled out a partnership with the appropriately named Operation Homefront to provide funds and resources for transitioning veterans. We did Build a Bike, and we built bikes, and the National Guard came and got them, and they took them to children of veterans. So, you have to you got to put your actions where your mouth is. And you can say things, right? But then there has to be the affiliated action and follow up to go with that. So from a leadership perspective, if it's not you, it's nobody. I mean, you are, at the end of the day, you are accountable to lead the hearts and the minds and the strategy, and then how that all gets communicated to all the people that it needs to be communicated to build a great, clear positioning within your marketplace, and to create a firm foundation of who you are and what you stand for, and where your excellence is inside of your organization. So those are the things that I think about. And it doesn't matter if you're a 2-person company; those things still matter.
That's a great list. And even reflecting back as I was listening to you, as I've seen you operationalize those within your organization, as I've seen other people share similar sentiments, and then if I've seen them operationalize or not, I think that's a tremendous list. So previous to mentioning or saying the phrase, what people need to be, I also heard you mention what people need to feel. So as you look at your role in building great leaders and building organizations and bringing greatness to Main Street USA, as you illustrated, if from your perspective, what do people need to feel as they buy into a leader or an organization in order to develop their own personal greatness?
Well, I'm going to go to a Facebook meme here. I've got it up on my wall. I saw it and I'm like, well, this is on Facebook, but it said, never treat a loyal person in such a way that they no longer care. And that kind of spoke volumes to me, because everybody has, I don't care who you are, there's an emotional side to it. Now, great leaders and great managers use numbers, not words, right? So if you don't have you can't, without a business model and a business plan, and that clearly demonstrate the economics of what you're trying to accomplish, and being disciplined to that, you can get yourself in trouble. That being said, there's an emotional side, there's an effort side, there's an alignment that great people need to be great. They also need autonomy, right? So if you go back to the great book by Tony Hsieh, founder of Zappos, which is Delivering Happiness, it's people need perceived control over what happens to them. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. Good people like to be curious. Think about it. If you want to be intensely focused and you want to be curious, right? Those people that have those qualities are not going to like to be just told, put this widget over here and then you're done. That doesn't serve them well. So if you want those types of people, then you got to create the conditions where people can have that kind of impact within their area. Perceived progress. Negative progress is one of the biggest dissatisfiers in life. Nobody wants to be backwards in their relationship, making less money, stuck in their job, doing whatever it is, and with no perceived chance of progress in their life. Connectedness. So, whatever culture it is you set, it's going to be good for some people, not good for other people. because we're all different, and nobody's wrong, and everybody's got their ability to say, these are my experiences, this is my values, this is and that's not going to be a good fit for every organization. Organizations can't be all things to all people. So there's people that we've had that, clearly wanted to just move, came from a big company. They just wanted to move deck chairs around and not really make any progress. And, the work reflected that, and the questions reflected that, and the progress reflected that. And it's like, you know what? I can't leave you to yourself because you don't do anything outside of, what you were told to do a week ago. I mean, we need creatives. And especially with, by the way, I mean, if I remember, I was at, where was I at? Salesforce years ago, and I was in an AI seminar, and they were talking about, our workforce is going to be increasingly more creatives, because it's going to be about the quality of the question and the curiosity of the query that's really going to, have more value than you providing the answer, or, moving things along marginally. So, and Google, by the way, there's a great book called How Google Works, and it talks about how they identified early that they wanted to hire creatives, and they know what it looks like, and they know how to discern whether somebody's a creative or not. So, you want creative people, especially now, because the tools. I mean, I was asked to write a few things this weekend. I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, Chat GBT. Let me just dictate. I dictated a paragraph, and then I smacked it into Chat GBT, and then I made an edit to it, and something that used to maybe would have taken me 2 or 3 hours to do took me 20 minutes.
Wow.
But I knew the questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what to ask for, and it was good. And then I just made it my own, and off you go. So, and then I think that, the last thing is, from he's, a worthy ideal, pursuit of a purpose or a worthy ideal. Leadership's responsible really to connect what everybody in the organization is doing with something that matters. And whether it's Tom's shoes, one parachute, you buy one, one's getting delivered somewhere else in the world to somebody that doesn't have shoes, or whatever it is. I mean, we all have at the end of it, I'm not going to say we all, because there's all kinds of different, but the majority of people, given the option, would want to create some sort of value, some sort of, benefit to people. I'm working, I'm getting my pay, we're doing the widget, we're delivering on that. But when we all deliver together, 1 + 1 = 3, and we're able to have this ancillary benefit to some group or some other people, and maybe just make the world a little better place while we're here.
And again, something just like you said at your Homefront event last week, between the Build a Bike and the Carson Foundation and the Homefront Foundation, that you exhibit every time out. As you were talking earlier, especially about franchising, it's not necessarily a company with 2,000 employees. It's 200 companies or 200 families with 10 employees. Hopefully my math checks out on that one.
I'll run that by the business office. I think it's good.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for not embarrassing me. You have family working for you and with you. And as I work with businesses that they have family within the business, that can have its great benefits. It can also create its challenges as well. What are some of the things that you and your family have learned in order to help balance business excellence with family relationships and responsibilities?
Family seems to work best when there's an actual professional skill set that is required, and they've proven that they have excellence in that discipline, so that everybody kind of knows where the guardrails are. That's been my experience. So I've had family since the beginning, and with maybe a 50% hit rate. Because if somebody's just like family's not a good enough reason in a high performing organization to be employed. It's just not. I mean, and if it's not working out, the the negatives far outweigh the positives, especially if people are taking advantage or that they perceive that they play by a separate set of rules. So, so over the years, I've had people in the business when we were a contractor and doing things, and sometimes it worked well, and other times it was clearly not going to work well. And it's just, and family's no different. I mean, they have to be able to perform, and you could make the case that they need to perform better. They need to, because they have to overcome the stigma of family inside of that. Now, you could say that you trust family more because they should be aligned with protecting the company and all that, but I've also found that not to be the case. I mean, everybody's who they are, and inside of that. So where right now, we do have family working in the business, and each of the family members that are working in the business are uniquely qualified. So my brother Mike, who was the CFO of the Carolina Panthers NFL football team, is our CFO. So that was I don't know, $350 million business between the stadium company and the team, maybe, I have no idea, somewhere in that ballpark. Hundreds and hundreds of employees, collective bar, all the things that, a complex franchise is the NFL. And so he is more than qualified to be the CFO here. And so it works. And he doesn't report to me. We have a president of franchising and a COO, and that's kind of the reporting line right there when it comes to the franchise stuff. And then on the family office stuff, we work together. And then my son was an econ and finance degree and did a little sell side advisory, came into the business, and then he did all of our M&A. But again, he was skilled and experienced in doing that. And then he moved over to leading our building our development team, which was a new skill for him, but he's done exceptionally well at it. So that works. And let's see. And then, I've got, if you read my book, Discernment, I would say that everybody needs a side hustle. So I have a 19-year-old, material science engineering major at Virginia Tech, freshman, my son, but he grew up as a, YouTube guy. Like, he knows so much about YouTube. Well, he's taken a real interest in our On The Homefront podcast. So moving, and because that's his side hustle. So he is actually now moving into producing the podcast, because he was actually digging into it deeper than our team was digging into it in terms of, and then because he's such a YouTube guy, he's like, well, if you change the intro to this, people are going to listen this much longer. And, so he started testing and doing all that kind of stuff. And he's fully engaged with it. He's part of a team, again, doesn't report into me, but he's added he's super high amount of value inside of that. So he's uniquely qualified to do what he's doing. And if he didn't do a good job on it, then that would stop immediately. So he seems to be, overdoing it. And working till 2 a.m. and I see him coming in on my phone, creating all the shorts and the clips, and then looking at, changing things depending on how the marketplace is reacting to these certain things, which is something that we were using some outsources and who were using some AI tools. And candidly, what they weren't doing was they weren't looking at it close enough. So, they were like, AI will basically produce a podcast for you, but does it really make sense? What AI said made sense, or did it not land? Like, there still has to be that human that looks at it and says, that's interesting, or that should start there and stop there, or this is one of the 3 things that we should put up front as a hook. AI can't do that because it's just not human. So it can organize them. It can tell when things start and stop, so it can get you like 80% of the way there. But in the competitive world of podcasting, 80% is not good enough. That means you are going to be like super last. So you've got to get everything right, and you've got to be able to do it long enough to where it catches. And we're making good progress there, but I can tell you. So, but yeah, so those situations are working out. But I would, the other thing is, a lot of people get family in the business when they start a business. And there is a correlation between how many partners start a business and how fast they can go. So I see it in franchising. If you have a husband and wife team and they're properly skilled, and one takes sales and one takes operations, and they're actually skilled in those things, those businesses start really fast. If it's a husband and wife team or whatever it is, or whatever it is, then two people start this business, but they're not properly skilled in the areas that they are assigned, then that tends to go poorly. So you have to, they got to hire sales, so they've got to hire these other things in. So, but there is definitely a correlation to the ability to divide and conquer, and for people to be focused on getting a business up and off the ground. But again, the startup phase, the market penetration phase, is going to be different than the what's business, the business as usual phase, with incremental growth every year, adding another truck, adding salespeople. At some point you got to have professional management. You got to have talented salespeople out there. So, those are the things that the family business, maybe the best thing would be that one of the two original founders leaves the business and goes back and gets a job, and the other one runs it. It just depends. So those dynamics, we see it play out in an accelerated fashion in the franchise world, because their intention of the way that it would work out and their satisfaction with doing the roles that they're assigned, it comes to light relatively quickly.
I'm curious, and thank you for such an in-depth answer on the family question. I appreciate that. And by the way, masterful job dropping your book and your podcast in the middle of that answer. So very,
did I?
Well done.
Oh, did I, Michael? I didn't know.
Very well done. Let that be a lesson for people, how to weave in what you want to promote into another answer. That was very well done. And there's another book that we're going to talk about coming up too, so we're not going to forget that one. But when you talk about the expectations being different, I guess the right way potentially to ask the question would be specifically from the franchising world, but I imagine this can correlate beyond the franchising world to people as they take on new roles or start businesses. If you had to say, what are the most commonly misunderstood expectations that cause partnerships or businesses to fall flat?
Here's what's interesting is, at some level, it doesn't matter what somebody's doing anymore, but it always starts there. And being in Vistage for so many years, I had a conversation with a business owner just last week, and he's considering leaving the partnership that he is. And they started the partnership, and now he says, well, I'm doing all the work, right? And the other partners aren't doing the work, and he's creating the economic benefit. So now he feels like his piece of it is he's creating an outsized return for them. And that's where a lot of small businesses start. I saw it in my dad's business. He was an engineer, and he had a partner, and my dad ended up doing a lot more work. He just worked longer, harder hours. So over time, that created this rift between them and stuff like that. But is that really, I would suggest that if that thinking is inside the business, it's going to be an impediment to its ability to scale. Because at the end of the day, it's the shareholders, partners, leaders' job of the business to constantly be replacing themselves to be able to scale the business. And some businesses might not lend themselves to scaling. Some people might decide, I'm going to be an individual contributor, and this is the business, and I am the talent, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to create leverage in these ways. And I mean, I know people that build businesses where they make, $2, $3, $4 million a year, man, but like everything runs through them. And it can be done, especially today with technology and all of the things that we have. But, it's really not about when you're building businesses of scale. I mean, the higher that you get in the business, the more that you get paid for the fewer number of decisions that you make, and they have to be good ones. The impact that you can make in the business. I mean, it's hard for me because when I see people like working hard and working late, I'm like, man, I'm feeling guilty because they're working so hard on this business. And, but like, if I try to, all of my executives are better at me than what they do. All of them, every single one of them has towering strengths, marketing, legal, franchise development, business office, all of these people. They have, so if I were to try to go in and say, well, I just want to work alongside you because, that's what I want to do, the business would suffer, right? I would be slowing it down. I would be taking away their ability to have autonomy and to deliver the results in the way that they are, because now, I've got positional power and I'm coming in and everything I say would probably be considered differently and maybe under its merits or whatever. Uh, so, it's if you're gonna, you've got to have a little bit more of a, if you're going to scale a business, like that's why some people scale businesses over and over and over again, because they understand that their job, if what Richard Branson, okay, Richard Branson would say, I'm going to cast a clear vision and I'm going to describe it in every way possible. What we mean to the world, what the market that we're going to be in, how big it's going to be, how many of this, how many of that, how fast it's going to scale, all of this. I'm going to create this vision that says we are going to go into this space and this is what we're going to do. And this is what it's going to look like. And this is what it's going to mean. And this is what it's going to mean to us and anybody else around it. The second thing is then he says, okay, well, if that's true, who are the best people in the world? If I gave them this vision, that they would be able to build it. So then he goes out all over the world and he finds the best people that he could possibly find and recruit to build that team of initial leaders that have proven that they could bring that business plan down to the, put a business plan around the vision and then bring it to the ground. And then he makes sure that they have adequate resources. They are not resource constrained to be able to execute on that vision. So inside of that, right, if that's the scaling a business strategy, well, then, saying, well, Michael, you didn't do this estimate, I did this estimate, that has nothing to do with how that business is going to scale. So it's the thinking around that, right, is different. But that's kind of where you are when you're starting a business. It's a small business because number one, you're probably needing to eat out of the business. So like you need to get paid, and you're resource constrained. You don't have $10 million to build this business. You've got what you came into it with, and you got to make some money to be able to make additional investments. So now every person has to actually pull deep on the oars. And that's where, and some people have a bigger motor than others, and some people are going to pull deeper, and some people are going to say, I'm bringing more value because I'm doing sales, and you're bringing less value because you're doing ops, and this kind of stuff. But you still need all of those things to get done. So that's where small businesses tend to stay small, and other businesses, the conditions for scale are set from the very beginning, and the quicker that these people can resource their areas and move themselves out of it and get those key functional areas of the business led by people that have the ability to do it, that's where businesses can scale. And that was our approach with Homefront Brands,
which is very demonstrably paying off for you based on the event that I was able to see a small piece of last week. I would love to continue down this rabbit hole. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I want to be very respectful of your time. I know you have a lot going on, and there's another.
No, I'm good today. I'm good today. Yeah.
I appreciate that. But there's another topic, so maybe we'll circle back. But there's another topic that I know you don't get a chance to talk about as much as you would like to. And it's one that we have a shared passion for, and that is coaching youth athletics. And
Yes.
I've had to have small conversations with other folks about the topic, but I believe your book is titled "Hey Coach." Do I recall that correctly? I'll have links
Yes.
to all of your books, your podcast, just everything, Jeff Dudan. I will make sure is linked in the show notes for people to find after this. But I know that you are a person with a well-honed philosophy on coaching youth sports that has many ties into your family values and personal values and business values. So I used to try to tee you up for this conversation. For you, when we as parents are volunteering or spending our time developing kids through sports, because that development goes well beyond sports. I think we all know that. What are your first areas of focus or priority when you're coaching kids?
I love it. I love the ability to opportunity to speak about this because I never get to anymore. And so so when I decided to franchise our business and come off the road and build a team that could help other people create the business, one of the big things was I wanted to be present in the lives of my children, and I that manifested in my ability, my saying yes to coaching over 30 seasons of my kids' athletics in all different sports. Some I had expertise in, others I had to learn a little bit and round it out. But fortunately, with other coaches and whatnot. And then near the back half of my career there, it I was developing leadership of franchisees at the same time I was developing leadership of a group of 10 to 12-year-old kids over a 4-month season. And launching a franchise and the steps there was very, very similar in coaching these kids. I mean, leadership is clear communication, simple goals, filling out, letting everybody know up front what was going to be important, how we, getting a set of values, as to how we make decisions, and what we're all committing to here. So we just developed this methodology, and so I would have uh, coaches come to me all the time, and I mean even at the local middle schools and high schools and stuff like that, that would be around these youth teams we were coaching. They'd be like, tell me, I want to know like what you do, because we go to the drafts for these little teams, and you know how they have parents that make requests and they write them on a little note, and they'd start opening the requests and they'd read them, and it was like every kid wanted to be on our team. Well, why was that? And it was really about the framework with which we approached a season, kind of broken down into thirds. And the goal, there was, at the end of the day, what was the purpose and the goal? We want you to play fast, loose, and happy and for each other. And we all want to be the best we can be on the last day of the season. Okay, so that's coaches, that's parents, that's children. So that's a pretty clear directive. We're all going to be the best that we can be on the last day of the season. We're going to play fast, we're going to play loose, we're going to play happy, we're going to play for one another, right? And then there's a huge underscore of autonomy inside of that. So what does that mean? Well, so we ended up with these 3 little tomes, right? Uh, um, Player rules, coaching commitments, and parental expectations. And each one had a little list of things that they were accountable to. And so we would have a meeting, and where most coaches would say, leave your kids with me, don't coach them from the sidelines, don't interrupt with what we're doing, we've got your kids. I would say, I want every parent here involved in this team. We need a timekeeper on the sideline. We need a special teams coach. We need somebody to count plays. We need somebody to do this. We need team parents. Some of the stuff we did was in faith-based leagues. So we need people to do, we would do a 10 to 15-minute talk before. We need people to do a devotion. We need people to bring a lesson. So we would have a team of 20 kids, and we'd have 14 coaches, right? And some of them had experience in this. There's a football by example, but some of them didn't. So now my job is to do what? coach the coaches, provide a vision for the team that was absolutely clear about what we did and who we were and how we went about it, and then to get the best people and the best, if they're interested in their kid, right? And everybody wanted to be quarterback, but that's not how we did it, right? Some people would just help and they wouldn't help the other kids, and they would just follow their kid around practice. And I've talked to them and say, look, you're here for you, coach them all. That was one of the things, coach them all. So, and then and then properly resource it with education and stuff like that. And we did. So it was the same philosophy in doing it. And in the first, so one of the first things we did was we made sure that we broke cliques, because usually you would have some returning players coming back, and the expectation is that they were going to get the football, and they were going to be, and there was and they were kind of clicking up. So we did things to break that out and identify leadership and talk to them about what their role was in making this like one team. And then we installed everything with a strong focus on fundamentals. So every position had 5 to 7 things that led to success in that position. Alignment, responsibility, and technique. Okay. If you're a defensive end, start on the outside shoulder, keep your outside arm free, get 2 yards up the field, keep your shoulders parallel to the line of scrimmage, right? Get to the depth, fight yourself to the depths of the quarterback. If something's inside, and you can squeeze things down. So they knew that was their exact job in our defense, is to, we got to stop speed before it gets started, and we're going to keep them in the box. And if we could find 2 kids that could do those 5 things, that's what they did. They were playing their role. And then the tackles, and then the linebackers, and then the corners, and the safeties. So what would happen is so we didn't recruit. We took any of the kids that were who wanted to be on our team. It didn't matter. We didn't play this kid's got to ride with that kid game like everybody does, because they're the best player and all that kind of thing. We didn't do that. We just took whoever they gave us. We're typically small. And oftentimes we would lose a game early because we just drilled on these fundamentals. You could hear it. And I think and the refs were we would just constantly be working on these fundamentals, just getting the kids to do what they wanted to do. And then we installed all of that, and pretty much 90% of what we were going to have for the season, we would install in the first couple of 3 weeks, maybe 2, maybe 4 weeks, maybe the first 2 games into the season or whatever it was. And then what we would do is then we would look at it, and then we would kind of make personnel adjustments. We would know who our players were, and then we would kind of start to move kids around to get them in the place where they could have success. And all of that. And then the third, there's some other things in there, and then it's running along. But the third thing that we would do would be, we would say, if none of the coaches could show up in the championship game or the last day of the season, whenever that is, that you could do this yourself, right? So, if you looked at our warm-ups, it wasn't like you kids get on the line and do a bunch of push-ups and do this kind of thing. It was like we'd warm them up and we do some dynamic stretching, but then we'd let them go with their position groups, just like a college football team. And we gave them autonomy, right? Okay. If you're a linebacker, take some pass drops, catch the ball a little bit, loosen up your pads, but we taught them how to do that. And then we let them do that. So it's subtle, but significant. Okay. If you're just looking at your coach and saying, tell me what to do, tell me what to do, tell me what to do next, you're taking the ability away from that kid to be great on their own situationally out on the field when you're not out there anyway. So if you can teach them that, and you teach them the accountability, and then they're helping each other stay accountable to it, it's subtle but significant, but it was all about their mindset and how they approached it. And we won championship after, there was one game, man, we had this nemesis team, and they had literally scored 250 points in a season and given up 6, right? And they crushed us early in the season, beat us like a drum. And they had a little film crew out there. They had their post-game party all set up. Like we were just a matter of course, right? Okay. 8-0 in overtime. We beat them.
Wow.
We held them to nothing. And we did that a couple of years in a row. It was like, and it was, now, okay. So now from a coaching perspective, what are the coaches responsible to do? And I'm sorry, I'm doing this all football, but I also did basketball. I did baseball and all that kind of stuff. Did a little soccer. But the coaches are responsible. Now you got the kids and they're on their program. Now, what are the coaches? You're responsible to create one turnover a game that we wouldn't have had through a pressure, through something. Okay. And then to create one score. And if we can give our kids one score and one turnover, and then we've done our job. Now it's up to them. Like if they play even, then we win the game. And that would be what they were responsible to do. And then what the parents were largely responsible to do was support the program and not ruin everything that we're trying to do in the car ride on the way home. because that's what happens, right? It's everything you do is undermined by them saying, are you getting a fair shake? Are you getting enough playing time? So that would be the thing is, support what we're doing here. Don't undermine it. We've got a good thing. And after a couple of years, man, it was like the program was pretty much set. And that's the kind of stuff we did. So it probably sounds better than it does. I'm looking at it from my perspective. I was very proud of these kids and these parents and these coaches. And it was always, it was probably the most rewarding stuff working with all three of my kids and the various things that they did. I wouldn't trade anything for it.
Nor should you. And for me, number one being 100% aligned in philosophy. Fundamentals and fun come first, especially with kids.
Yes.
Just understanding even the building blocks that go beyond sports with learning the fundamentals, implementing the fundamentals, having fun, playing for each other. We were talking last week. I just came off of coaching a 6U baseball season. And one of the things that we did to help start getting the kids to think like leaders and take ownership was we had little wristbands. And every game, one or two kids got to be captain. So they got to lead the stretch and lead the cheering and do different things to try to take that sort of responsibility. But that fun, the fundamentals, all of those things are so important. But also listening to how you frame coaching almost perfectly analogous to how you frame your business. So what is successful in business, the successful structure for running business is often quite analogous to the successful structure of coaching youth sports. And there's lessons across the two. We initially met through Vistage. Earlier this summer, I was running a Vistage program, and you know how it can be with a room full of CEOs. You tell people it's a 10-minute break, and 35 minutes later, they walk in like, what's your problem? So break had gone a couple of minutes long, and I just called everybody back in, and they all came back in. And the chair looked at me and was like, well, where'd you learn how to do that? I was like, coaching T-ball. And one of the guys looked at me and I said, you would probably be offended if I told you how many similarities there are between coaching 5- and 6-year-olds and dealing with a room full of CEOs, like attention span, motivation, like
100%.
So many things are identical. But for me, when I looked at how I set up my team and my coaching staff and what we were doing, and I haven't got to that age bracket yet, my son is still 6, but I based a lot of it on how I build and run my seminars and workshops and who has to know what in what order and who's doing what pieces for all this to run into place. So those same structures apply. And when you look at it as I'm dealing with human beings, and based on the situation that we're in together, what do we want to achieve and what do they need to feel in order to achieve it? Things that we've already discussed today, keeping those high level values and priorities in mind makes such a difference for these kids that otherwise are going to get coaches that are screaming at them, telling them what's wrong, or parents in the car making excuses for them or potentially screaming at them, those kinds of things. So I know we share the passion and I could go on, but having the opportunity to positively impact kids' lives through teaching in an athletic environment is such a privilege. It can have such an impact.
Well, let me share just a couple of stories on this because I never get to. if you
Please.
don't mind.
I don't mind at
And
all.
so, it's like, it sounds like we were running some, crazy program here, right? But at the end of the day, it's, if I remember Eric Magnuson, who's our offensive coordinator, his kids played with us for, we were together for several years. And I would take the defense, he would take the offense, and which is funny because I never played defense. I learned from a great coach with my older son, who's Doug Moore, and I learned like how to coach defense from him. So, and I kind of liked it actually. Now I'm thinking about, I wish I would have played some defense. I might have gone a little farther, but um, so, but he would say, it's real simple. Have fun, play for one another, and eat popsicles on Thursday. So what we would do was Thursday night, we'd play on Saturday, but Thursday was our last practice of the week, and we would, we would have popsicles, like, somebody would, that was our thing. So the working copy of my book, Hey Coach, was actually called The Popsicle Plan, and that was it, and that was the working title through the entire thing. Now, what happened is so the Gibbs family, we went to South Lake Christian, and the Gibbs family, Joe Gibbs, Hall of Fame coach and NASCAR family, they coach there as well. And because they had their grandkids. So my kids all have friends. They're all with the Gibbs, with Joe's grandchildren. And they have different ages. And we all went to school together, and just amazing family. They just are so great, and they contribute so much to so many causes. But so anyway, we had this little jamboree, and they had great players, and a couple of our players were on vacation, but it was a preseason like scrimmage and stuff, and they were just throwing these, like had timing routes, and they killed us, man. They ran us. They had the best running back in the league. They had a good quarterback. They had some receivers, and they were just throwing these timing routes down the sideline, and they beat us, 5 touchdowns to nothing over a 20-minute scrimmage or whatever it was. And I said, okay, well, we got a couple of players coming back that are pretty good. We've been working on our fundamentals. I said, but man, we have to take something away from them. We got to take away, you have to take away from another team what they want to do the most. So what we decided was we were going to teach our corners to jam. So, you got little 8 and 9-year-old or 10-year-old kids, and you're teaching them. Now you're like, okay. So we worked all week on disrupting the timing of their receivers. So like, whatever you're going to do, you're not going to beat us over the top. Because a 10-year-old safety can't really go sideline to sideline. They're just not going to get the jump and that kind of thing. So they took we took that away, and we had our other players, and we kind of hit them in the mouth, and we ended up being up 14-0 at halftime. Okay. And it was the first game of the season. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, I think Coach Gibbs will have halftime adjustments. I think he will have adjustments for his team. And so he got them settled down, because they were like, we hit them in the mouth, and they got them settled down, and they were the more talented team. So they start coming back on us, right? And they start really, so it ends up being 14-13. And we're going, we end up we're on our own like 11-yard line, and it's 4th and 4. And there's a minute and a half or 2 minutes left in the game. And the kid that's now got his feet under him, he's back there to catch this punt. If we punt it to him, we're not gonna tackle this kid with the linemen and stuff that we got running around there. I mean, if we punted it to them, they were going to score, and they were going to win the game. So again, here's where the coaching comes in. That last practice, we put in something called freeze on tap, where nobody moves, and they just hand the ball to the quarterback through his legs, and he just walks through the line. So we run that play, we get the first down, time runs out. And their players are like, they can't do that. And Coach Gibbs like, yes, they can. And they did. And, they were good sports about it and all that. So we ended up winning the game. So later in the season, he's doing some ESPN NASCAR show, and they're coming to the practice, and they're watching the kids play, and, for the show, and they're interviewing them. And there's like, wait a minute, Coach, you're 7-1. Like, how did you lose a game? And he goes, we got out coached.
Wow.
So I was like, so I have that article. It's up on my wall, and I highlighted that phrase, just for me, just for me. That shows you what kind of person he is. Like he's like, like he remembered back, and he's like, well, I mean, and on that day, I mean, they made a call that we didn't, and whatever. So I'm at a charity event for veterans some few weeks later, and this is now I'm coming to the end of my coaching career, so I'm going to write the Hey Coach book, and I'm walking out, and afterwards, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey Coach," and I turn around, it was Joe Gibbs. And so we stopped and we talked and had a great conversation. And he's always just, he's quiet. I mean, to me anyway, he's just very very reserved and always very nice and thoughtful. He's always on. He's just a great man. And anyway, so I'm like, well, that's the name of the book right there. Hey Coach.
That's awesome. And for people that don't know, Joe Gibbs is a multiple time Super Bowl winner in the NFL, a
Yeah.
multiple time NASCAR champion team owner. So you're talking about a man who has coached and led champions at the very highest level of athletic competition in two different sports. So to receive that kind of compliment from that person, if you named your book anything else, especially knowing the backstory, it would have been a missed opportunity. And you better have that article framed and highlighted in multiple places. That's a fantastic story.
Yeah, I mean, coach is such an honor. It's an honor, and it's a privilege, and it's an obligation. And then the other quick story I'll tell is I worked my son was playing middle school football, and I was watching for a few weeks, and they needed some help, and I actually went on to offer to assist, and then I ended up working, and they saw me working with the kids. I ended up like being the defensive coordinator on that middle school team, and then we went on to win the only championship in their history. We actually, it was a great experience, going from, where they were and then being able to implement things. And they had a good offensive, mind, a good offensive coach going, and they had good talent, but, they really needed some help on the defense, and that ended up working out good. But we were walking to one of the neighboring schools for our game. And, these coaches didn't know who I was or what I'd done or anything in the background or whatever. And we're walking up, and the other team's there, and there's maybe 30 kids on this other team, and about 12 of them just start running over. And like the coaches all just stopped and like, what's going on? What's going on? Well, they were all my players. So it was kids that I had coached, and just, hey coach, how you doing? And we all sat there, and some of them gave you a hug, and some high five or fist bump or whatever it was. And we were just so excited to just see each other, during that time and stuff like that. And and all the coaches from our team were just like, how does he know all these kids or whatever. So as you walk around and you make this impact, and what did they learn? Like, what did these kids learn from the effort and the organization and the leadership and the lessons and the testimony and all of these, any of the experiences, the good, the bad, and how you deal with it? Like, pouring that in and making that part of a child's experience into their understanding, like they could either internalize it or not, but like it's in there. Like, they know how to build a team. They know how to approach a situation where there's nothing, and then to organize it, and then to be able to do that. So I have to think that for some of them, if not all of them, that effort will play out somewhere else in the world, somewhere in the future, through these kids' lives. And I think that's really that's the reason that you coach.
Amen. You're 100% correct. Whether they realize it's where they got it from, where they realize that's what they learned, and that's where they learned it. I agree 100%. We're not, especially with the young kids, we're not coaching kids to win the town championship, the state championship. Yeah, it's nice when those things happen, but
Sure.
we are building life skills, problem solving, coaching, competition, success under stress, like all of these things, like values that you talk so much about. That's what we're really instilling. And to me, yeah, I know there's parents that get thrown into volunteer coaching because nobody else could, or they don't really want to, or maybe they feel like they're supposed to because their mom or dad did or whatever. But if we're getting involved in youth sports without the express goal of doing things and instilling values and skills to help these young kids be more successful later in life, then we're wasting everybody's time. That's what it should be about. And I do want to call out that right there, as you wrapped it up, you talked about the same thing for standing up a business, taking something from nothing. Even if the coaches aren't there, even if they don't realize it, they can start somewhere and they can build this and they can make it a success. So once again, coming full circle for the skills on the ball field to the skills in business as well. I'm thrilled that we had the chance to talk a little bit about youth sports because I know how passionate you are about that. And I am as well. So to work that into a more business themed conversation was not an opportunity that I wanted to miss. But I think two more questions for you before we head out here. One would be, as you look back through all of your experience, business, coaching, even some of the CEO groups that you've been a part of that we didn't get a chance to talk with today. We briefly mentioned Vistage, didn't get to YPO, some other organizations. For people who are filling a leadership role, whether it's business, family, community, doesn't matter. For people filling leadership roles, in your opinion, what do they need to always keep in mind to get the best out of those around them?
Boy, that's a big question. Well, be accessible, be authentic, and pursue absolute clarity by every measure that's possible. What looks like hesitation, what looks like lack of effort, what looks like disobedience is almost always a lack of clarity. When people don't know what to do or why they're doing it, they hesitate, they do nothing, they make something up that's not right, and then it doesn't work, and then they get in trouble, and then they get frustrated. So really, part of a leader's role, I mean, one of the biggest, Patrick Lencioni has a great book. It's called The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary CEO, and every single one of them has the word clarity inside of it. So, I mean, it's just, when leaders get lazy, or we think, right, that people understand it and they're just not doing it, that's almost always never the case. So here's something that we talk about, right? Many people are conflict averse. So these 3 little words I talk about in our team building, along with a phrase, and if you're a business owner or if you're a business leader, if you can learn to do this, number 1, the 3 little words: rush to conflict. How many times are you driving around in the car saying, well, so and so didn't do this, or so and so didn't do that, or why can't they just do this, or what are they doing? And but if you can rush to conflict, the minute you realize that there may be a misunderstanding or some actions that are not tied to results or something like that, that you can rush into that, but you can't do it in a way that's like a grenade. You've got to do it in a way. So here's the quote, and I forget the guy's name, but it's: the person who can most accurately describe reality without laying blame shall emerge the leader. So when you walk in, I don't care if it's a group project in college, if you can describe reality, here's the situation, here's what needs to happen, here's what the objectives are, and then without saying, but you didn't do this, and you didn't do this, and you didn't do that, generally starting with an objective view of the circumstances, the challenges, and the goals, then people will start to have that conversation in that way. And then now you can start to organize now everybody understands what good looks like or what success looks like. And now you can start to organize your people, your resources, your tasks inside of that. against that opportunity. If you just blow up and say, why can't you just do this? And why aren't you doing this again? Now, it might be, now, sometimes people do need to be fired because they are disobedient or they are giving a lack of effort and they are just trying to rearrange deck chairs and get a paycheck and do as little as possible. Those people exist in the world, right? Now, did we make those people? Sometime the way we manage makes those people, right? So, culture is a funny thing, man. Like once if you're not intentional about it and you're not consistent with it, once it starts to turn, man, you got a big surgery to do in your company. You've got to cut that out and you got to get clean margins around it. So being intentional inside of a culture, making sure that there's that you can have healthy conflict and you can have difficult conversations and in a way that people don't get offended or to get hurt, because it's just normal, of course. When, if you're in a meeting and somebody's saying that's something that's clearly wrong, or it's clearly not aligned with the objectives of the organization, that people can call it out and discuss it and get the best answer and not, it not be a, HR problem around it and people saying you're out to get me and this type thing. That's, your leadership. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be this, you can do it in your style. It doesn't have to be this rah-rah thing, but like people have to know that like whatever the values of the organization are, and kind of some of those fundamental tenets of leadership, that because of those things, the consistency of those things, everybody knows where they stand. Because as long as people know where they stand, they're usually okay. And even when things don't work out with an employee, I've had them, and if you lead the right way, they will take accountability for that and say, yeah, I just don't really want to work that hard. I've got some other things going on in my life. I'm not looking for, I'm not trying to climb Mount Everest here. I'm just trying to make my bills. I see everybody else is really bought into what's going on here, and I should probably just go somewhere else. I've had that as well too. Because once you get a high performing team and then you get somebody that wants to come in and talk to everybody and lean on the walls and talk to everybody and lean on the walls, that's just going to make everybody else's job harder. Or, high performing organizations will reject those people. And there has to be a mechanism for that inside of it. Like it has to be like, they just, if somebody wants to like waste time and be disruptive and, cash a paycheck, then the organization needs to kind of reject that behavior almost at every level. Like they can't get traction, well, hey, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't know, but what about this? Are you getting that done? So, and that's the beautiful thing about it is when you have somebody new, and then you have people from all over the organization saying, yeah, that person's not going to work. Like it's not, you don't even have to do it from a managerial perspective. Like they're just like, no, we can't have this. It's not, they're not here for the right reasons. They don't have good intent. They're not looking to be part of this team, and they're not looking to pull their own weight. And, at the end of the day, like high performing organizations get a lot done. And so I don't know if that's responsive to your question, but really, building an intentional culture, rushing to conflict, and being able to have a mechanism where healthy conversations can include conflict, and there's still healthy conversations and things are resolved in a healthy manner.
I love it. You answered my question in spades, and I had to chuckle a little bit here in the clarity piece, thinking back to coaching. There was one particular time late in the season where the kids were all out in the field, and I yelled, "Bring it in." And they all ran right past me into the dugout. And I meant come to me, but they all ran into the dugout. And one of them was like, well, they're not listening tonight. And I shook my head. I'm like, nah, man, that is all on me. And I walked into the dugout and I told them what I had to say in the dugout, because that's where they're all. But yeah, if 10 kids do one thing, clearly they all got the same message. The messenger has to be the one who's wrong.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for this entire conversation. I took a page and a half full of notes once again, and we talk relatively regularly. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for all the wisdom you shared, business, family, coaching, and beyond. I really appreciate it. So the last question, there have to be people who are listening right now that are thinking, I need to learn more from Jeff. I need to experience more from Jeff. Hey, Jeff said a lot of things about franchising that I hadn't previously considered or wasn't previously aware of. So where can people go to learn more from you, to learn more about you, and potentially learn what it may take to get involved in the franchising world through your organizations?
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. So LinkedIn, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, just Jeff Dudan, Dudan. Always looking for connection there. And then you can scroll my posts and see all the great things that are going on. You can go to homefrontbrands.com and learn about, I mean, we are one of the, if not the fastest growing property service franchise platform in North America right now. Incredible franchise owners, franchise partners that are joining us, really quality people that are seeing an opportunity, catching the vision of what we're building here and coming all in with it. And I'm just so happy to be in business with these people. It's just a blessing. It really is. You can listen to, if you want to know a little bit more about me and how I think about things, I do have a business book called Discernment. It is the business athlete's regimen for a great life through better decisions. It's available on Amazon. So just, you can go there and get that book. I understand it's worth a read, especially if you're at some transition point in your life and you're thinking like, how do I make these decisions? These are all dozens of models of thought in there about decision making and, you know, with stories and all of that kind of stuff built into it. And then we have a top 40 podcast on Apple called On The Homefront with Jeff Dudan. So you can get that on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere that you get your podcasts. We've had incredible guests on there. So a lot of people that you would recognize, business builders, you know, just really, I got Andrew Zimmern on this afternoon. So that's the Bizarre Foods guy. I'm really looking forward to that. He has a lot to say. And I'm really interested to have that conversation with him here in just a couple of hours. So we've had guests of that caliber on. So those are the places to get me. And otherwise, Michael, it's always a pleasure. You have an incredible mind. You are one of the best speakers that I've ever had the ability to listen to multiple times now. You were the highest rated speaker. You nudged me out at our event, which I'm glad for you, sad for me. We'll go at it again next year, maybe. But you're, you know, in your book, everybody should read it because the better that we can communicate, the better things are going to go for us.
Well, I appreciate all your kind words. Thank you very much. And I welcome a rematch next year. So if the opportunity is there, I would jump at that with both feet. So thank you. And let me put a plug in for your book, Discernment, as well, because I read that at a time where I was going through some reevaluation of decisions I was making for my business. And I took some of the question and consideration framework from that and worked it into what I was doing. So I want to make sure that I give a plug for that book and your podcast as well. I'll make sure I have links for everything here. Thank you so very much for your time. As always, so many wonderful thoughts and ideas. I can't thank you enough, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.